me. Hello, everyone. Hello. Here we are, live again. I'm playing around with my little lamp because it's been a bit dark the last few weeks. But I'm feeling all reflecty, so I hope I reflect in my glasses. It's very off-putting. Hi, Greg and Hayley. Hello, David and Kate and Craig and Fiona. Excellent. Good to see you all. Welcome to Grenache evening. How exciting. I've got a live audience tonight. So if it gets rowdy over there, then you'll just have to excuse them because they'll probably get very excited about the beautiful Grenache that we've opened. Tonight, we're going to explore all things Grenache. It's very exciting because Grenache is one of my favourite grape varieties that we don't grow here at Moorooduc Estate. Hello, Cotty and John. How you going? Oh, hamburgers and oven-baked fat chips. How delicious. Yeah, I actually thought a big, juicy hamburger would be absolutely perfect with these big, juicy wines. So Grenache, and let's get some in our glass pretty quickly. Polly hasn't had dinner, so she's probably going to bark all session. But hopefully Richard will be able to feed her cashew nuts or something to keep her quiet. So Grenache is a beautiful grape variety that I love very much, but it's a little bit cool here on the Mornington Peninsula to grow it successfully. It's a grape variety that likes a warm climate, warm to hot climate. They think that it probably, Kate, Lamberger and Chateau Cres Richards. Wow, that sounds pretty cool. Hello, Sarah, and all the tricks. Hello, Anne. Lovely to see you. Craig, you got the Old MacDonald. Excellent. So I also have the Old MacDonald Grenache from Steve Pennell. So on the front, you just get your little red man, and it just says Grenache 2020. On the back, that tells you Old MacDonald. And this is one of many lovely Grenaches that come out of McLaren Vale and Barossa. Barossa makes some beautiful Grenaches as well. Greg and Hayley, you've got the Angara, fantastic. I love that wine. So we've got two Grenaches because, as I say, I have a little audience tonight. So we decided that we needed to do a compare and contrast. So we've got the SC Pennell Grenache, and then we've got the Gramenon La Sagesse. So that's, I shouldn't have the price on it. That's a bit rude. Anyway, expensive. Out of Richard's cellar, Gramenon La Sagesse, which is a Grenache, 100% Grenache Côte de Rhône. Gramenon makes a number of different wines, but they're all 100% Grenache. They're all labelled Côte de Rhône, and they come from different vineyards. So we'll have a little taste of that too. As you can see, we've already poured some of that out. Ministry of Clouds, McLaren Vale. David, I love that wine. Emily, hello. Two hands. Yesterday's Hero Grenache from McLaren Vale. Fantastic. Decanters didn't stock the McDonald's, so you have the Basso. The Basso Ganache is delicious shell, and the GST is also very good. He also does a sulfur-free Grenache, which I haven't tasted yet, but I've got a bottle of it in the glass room, which I'll taste another time. So let's get this show on the road. Let's get this bottle open, and we'll talk about Grenache. The first thing that we need to think about Grenache, apart from the fact that it likes a warm to hot climate, is that it's relatively thin-skinned and it's relatively perfumed in its character. So a lot of people describe Grenache as being the Pinot Noir of the South when we're talking about France, or Pinot Noir of slightly further north in Australia. Warmer climates. It grows where Pinot Noir doesn't grow, but it can do some very similar things as far as perfume and texture and intriguing kind of mid-palate, mid-body kind of style red wine. It's one of the reasons I really like Grenache. But the thing about Grenache that I find really interesting is the tannin texture, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we're tasting. Grenache actually, they believe, was first developed in the vineyards of Spain, and it's known as Garnacha in Spain. Priorat is probably the most famous region for straight Grenache in Spain these days, and the Priorats are very expensive. So they're delicious, but they're very concentrated and they're very delicious because, but they're expensive because there's no automation in Priorat. There's no way. It's on top of a hill. They have to bring donkeys in to get the fruit off the hill, and so it's very expensive to grow and make wine from grapes in Priorat. So therefore, the wine's very expensive. In Australia, so before we get to Australia, it also has been grown for a very long time in the southern Rhone and also down in the south of France. So if you think about Spain and then you go across the Pyrenees and you get sort of to the south of France and you go up around Provence and Costière de Nîmes, and then you go up to the southern Rhone, that's where Grenache is sort of king in France. Again, warm climate, lots of sunshine, really lovely aromas and flavours. But the other thing about Grenache is that it to get it at full ripeness, it also tends to have pretty high sugar levels, which means you can end up with some very high alcohol wine if you're not careful. So growing it in the right place, and I think that a lot of people in the Rhone are having trouble with Grenache these days, particularly in the southern Rhone in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, because it's getting too warm and they're getting these wines that are like really high ripeness level, beautiful flavours, but then very high alcohol, up to sort of 16.5%. Quite great. Yusuf, you're having a Reyes. How delicious. Are you really? How fabulous. So Reyes is a very famous Grenache from the Rhone, very beautiful wine. And I would be very happy if I was drinking Reyes. I would also be very happy if I was drinking Yangara Old Vine Grenache Coddy. That's a gorgeous wine. So in Australia, Grenache was going, oh, Anne-Marie, my two Grenaches. So the Old MacDonald from SC Pinnell is the 2020, which I believe is current release. If you're in the wine club with SC Pinnell and have just received a box from them, they've put a bottle of the 2021 as a pre-release tasting in that box. So if you got the 2021 from that box, then that's also an option. But we're drinking a 2020 today. Oh, Jill!
Yum, yum.
Jill's brought me a little snack. Thank you, Jill. What do you call these, love? Carrot fritters. Got to be happy about the carrot fritters. Yusuf, no, I'm not. It wouldn't be fair to drink it alone, but a nice Spanish Grenache, which should be really good. Absolutely, that'll be lovely. So, Anne-Marie, Gramenon wine is from 2015, the La Sagesse. So that was in Dad's cellar. We bought a little while ago. So, Fiona, she could sell that. The old carrot fritters. Woohoo! And Sue has brought me some sausage as well, because I said that sausage would be good with Grenache. Grenache is very nice with some with meaty flavours, if you're so inclined. Right, now, before I get my wines mixed up, I should taste the Old MacDonald first, because that's the wine that I think at least a couple of you are drinking tonight. Jill is a tease, isn't she, Anne-Marie? Everyone wants some carrot fritters, Jill. So you can see that it's got a lot of colour to it, and the guys on the other table are drinking the Rhone, so I've mucked them up already, but they'll be all right. If you want to get another glass and taste the two next to each other, then that's there. Cool, they're going to do that. So you can see that it's got a lot more colour than a Pinot Noir would, but we're drinking them out of Pinot Noir glasses. So I think that that's a good sort of nod to the aromatic profile of good Grenache. And I think before I start telling you the history of Grenache in Australia, I think we should taste the wine, because it's always very disappointing when I talk on and on and on and we don't taste what we've got in front of us. So deep purpley ruby colour, quite amazing colour on that wine. And it's taking a little while to open up. It's quite closed on the nose, but I expect to see some raspberry fruit characters. There's a little bit of sort of chocolatiness on the Old MacDonald that is always typical of that vineyard. It's got some really interesting sort of green, leafy, herbal kind of notes as well, which I really like because Grenache can just be a bit sweet and juicy and overripe sometimes, and this wine kind of treads that little tightrope between super ripe flavors, which are certainly going to be here as it opens up, but also that slightly herbal note that gives it a little bit more interest, a little bit more contrast, and for me makes it more interesting. It's really tight on the palate. It's going to take ages to open up, so I'm going to keep swirling that, and I'm going to talk to you about Craig. How's your if you are drinking relatively youthful Australian Grenache, you might want to put the rest of it into a decanter if you haven't already. I probably should have done that with this, but just ran out of time, basically, to be honest, which is always good. It's always nice to be honest, isn't it? Shell, homemade burgers, including melted Gruyere, grilled onions, slow-fried dehydrated tomatoes. How gorgeous. The burntness of the tomatoes is amazing with the Basso, not as much with the GST. So this is one of the cool things about Grenache. Grenache or Garnacha works really, really well with tomatoey flavours, which a lot of red wines don't. It also works really well with kind of barbecue lamb, sausages, burgers, all of those things. Just a little bit of lawn, freshly cut lawn, Cotty, I agree. The tannins are quite forward for Grenache, Craig, but I think that as the fruit kind of opens up, those tannins will fall back into place. So, Yusuf, you've just preempted me asking what my thoughts are on old vine Grenache in Australia and how they differ to vines from France. So in Australia, Grenache was planted mainly in Barossa and McLaren Vale in the very early days of the wine industry alongside Shiraz. Both varieties came from France with the James Busby collection. And Grenache is a grape variety that really has two very distinct life phases. When the vines are young, then the fruit that's produced, no matter how much work you put into the vineyard, the fruit that comes from young Grenache vines tends to be simple, tends to be straightforward. It's really good for making rosé. It's good for making simple, inexpensive, quaffable, easy drinking Grenache, or mixing or blending into a GST. So a GST, you probably already guessed, stands for Grenache, Shiraz. The T is Tempranillo, I think. Shell, is that right? The GST. Usually it's Tempranillo in a GST in Australia, and it's not a traditional blend, but it's something that's happening a lot more out of Australia. But GSM is your normal blend with Grenache. Touriga, thank you, Shell. I trust SC Pinnell to be different. Tempranillo or Touriga. You've got a GST. No, not generally Tanat, Craig, but GSM is usually Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvedre, which is lovely. Mourvedre gives it a bit more savouriness and a bit more structure, but Touriga will do a similar thing because Touriga is a Portuguese variety. Mataro is the same, is a different name for Mourvedre. So it's the same grape variety, Mataro. It's just a different. I think it's the Australian name for Mourvedre because I don't think the Spanish call it Mataro. They call it something else again. Anyway, yeah, I'm right. Thank you, Dad. I'm just going to have a little bite of my carrot fritter while it's warm. So where did I get to? Old vine, young vine. Good for blending, good for making rosé, good for making simple, easy drinking wine. But Grenache vines really need to have significant age before they start producing really high quality fruit. And when I mean significant age, I mean 20, 30, 40, 50 years of age. In France, they will say 30 years is sort of the minimum age that vines should be to be called old vine. In Australia, it's a bit how old is a piece of string kind of thing. But in Barossa, particularly, they have a very organised vine aging sort of criteria, because there are some very, very old vines, both Shiraz and Grenache in Barossa, that are over 100 years old, and they call them great-grandfather vines, I think. And those vines are really old. They're very they're very wobbly. They're very delicate. They've got lots of damage done to their trunks and things like that, but they still produce fruit. They produce very small quantities of fruit, but the quality of the fruit is amazing because it's very concentrated. It's very dense, and it's very beautiful, particularly with Grenache, really beautiful florals. So yes, Kate, thank you. The Henschke Hill of Grace is 160-year-old vines. So this is what we're talking about. This is the sort of amazingness of old vines in Barossa, because South Australia has never had phylloxera. So when other parts of Australia were devastated by phylloxera about 50 years after Europe was devastated by phylloxera, it never got to South Australia. And so these old vines are some of the oldest vines in the world because they just kept going. They need a lot of love and a lot of care, but they are pretty magnificent to look at, and they produce tiny quantities of amazing fruit. So Yusuf, my thoughts on old vine Grenache in Australia. And the other thing about Australia is that, unfortunately, in the 1980s, the South Australian government, if you can hear a little bit of noise in the background, it's the dogs having their dinner. They're all licking their bowls and moving them around the floor. It's fine, Sue. I can talk over it. But in the 1980s, the South Australian government paid people to pull their old Shiraz and Grenache vines out and plant Cabernet and Chardonnay. Kay Farrow thought that Jill and Richard were line dancing. No, it's just the dogs being naughty. And the vine pull scheme was, in hindsight, ridiculous, but back in those days, it just, people thought that Grenache and Shiraz were a thing of the past, and that nobody would want to drink those wines again, and that Cabernet and Chardonnay were what people wanted to drink now. So let's plant new vines. We now know that old vines are incredibly precious, and luckily for us, there were a number of grumpy grape growers in McLaren Vale and Barossa who didn't pull their old vines out. So there are still some really amazing old vine material in those places, but a lot of the old vines got decimated because of that terrible decision. So luckily for us, they're ripping Semillon out in the Hunter for Shardy. You'd think that we would learn by now, Craig. It's really sad because Semillon will come back into fashion. People will start to understand Semillon again, and Chardonnay really is not the grape variety for the Hunter. It's too hot. It's too humid. It's really terribly sad. Anyway, what else are people saying? Shell, truffle seeded mustard on the side to be fancy does not match with either wine. No. I think truffle doesn't really work with Grenache. It's a bit too fancy. Grenache is a bit kind of more earthy, a bit more, I think Yusuf said poor man's Pinot, and I think that's a really good descriptor for Grenache because it's a little bit more affordable than Pinot Noir at these quality levels. And it doesn't really like fancy food as much as Pinot does. It's quite interesting. Yeah, Fiona, Chardonnay and the Hunter, dreadful. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't stop eating my carrot fritters. So hopefully that has given this purple wine. It's so purple. That colour is just awesome. I just love looking at it. It's starting to open up. So let me have a look at the Côte de Rhône, the Gramenon. Now, Gramenon wines are a little bit natural, a little bit natty, Craig. they would have been quite at home in that Italian restaurant that we met at last year for dinner. And this wine is much funkier than the Pinel. The Pinel. So Steve Pinel was the chief red winemaker at Hardy's for a long time. So he has a really good. He's got a really good track record for being a maker of big, clean, technically correct wines for a big wine company in his youth. And he left Hardy's because he wanted to do his own thing. Steve also has spent a lot of time making wine in Europe. He's made wine in Spain, he's made wine in Italy, and he's made wine in France. And he loves Spanish varieties, Portuguese varieties, and Italian varieties. So he makes a number of different grenaches, both in a sort of a more traditional Australian style, which I think this Grenache, the Old McDonald Grenache, is more sort of traditional Australian, traditional modern Australian. It's quite clean, but it's got nice restraint to it. It's not overdone. But he also makes his blended Grenaches in a more sort of Spanish kind of a way, which I think is also quite interesting. Typical oak treatment for Grenache, Craig, is really whatever people feel like. So if you're thinking about, again, if it's young vine material and it's quite simple wine, then less oak is better because it's going to overwhelm the sort of the delicacy of the wine. And I think Fiona was saying that you were having I hope it was Fiona, the Ministry of Clouds Grenache is a little bit more delicate than you thought it would be. And hello, Jack and Hannah. Oh, Zach and Hannah. Jack's got the lurgy. Oh, no. Ministry of Clouds tend to make quite elegant wines, and it's really interesting that their Grenache is more Pinot-like. I love their wines. Their wine is sold by the same people who sell our wine in Victoria and South Australia, so we're very lucky that I get to taste their wines on a semi-regular basis. I think they're delicious. Their Tasmanian Chardonnay is fantastic as well, but their Grenache is, I reckon, pretty awesome. The La Sagesse, I said to Dad when I opened it that it wasn't corked, but I'm wondering whether it is maybe a little bit corked. It's looking a little bit musty and a little bit, certainly looking a bit. Can you control your dog, please, Hannah? Karen's got the lurgy too. Oh, Craig, that's no good. Although a whole bottle for you is quite nice. I actually don't think the La Sagesse is corked. I think it's just a much more savoury version of Grenache. It's savoury because these guys use minimal sulphur, and the winemaking is very kind of natural. So you've got some earthiness. There's probably a little bit of slightly more savoury spoilage yeast. We could call it spoilage yeast, or we could say that it's just lovely savouriness. Yes, Craig, I think that musty is a taste profile for natural wines, and also mushrooms. And I get a real mushroomy kind of note in that La Sagesse from Gramenon. It's also a 2015, so it's older, and you can see that the colour is sort of a bit paler, but it's also a little bit more brick in its colour because that's from the age. From the aging process. It's really interesting, but it's opened up much more quickly as well than the SC Pinel, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes with a bit more time. Spinifex does have a good Grenache, that's right, Yusuf. I really like the Spinifex Grenache. Okay, coming back to the SC Pinel. I think this one might see a tiny bit of new oak, but not very much, because it's starting to kind of come up. I really shouldn't put food in my mouth while I'm trying to talk, should I? But it was just sitting there talking to me, beckoning me. I'll stop eating, I promise. It's starting to open up now, which is really cool. As well as that raspberry character that I saw. First of all, it's now starting to evolve some really lovely blackberry notes. It's quite perfume that's got almost rose petals. So this is what I'm talking about, Grenache being a little bit like Pinot Noir, but it's sort of darker and it's slightly different shaped tannins, but it still has this lovely, when it's good, it has this lovely lifted perfume, which is starting to come through. Slightest bit of vanilla coming through from the oak, absolutely, Craig. I think that's right. Bit of violet, bit of rose petal as well coming through. It's working actually very, very well with Jill's carrot fritters. I haven't had time to taste a bit of sausage yet, and I won't, because I think that would probably stop me from talking for a little while. I'll come back to the sausage later on. It's quite delicate on the nose, and then when you put it on your palate, you can taste the richness. Now, Jill, Kay wants the carrot fritter recipe. We'll do that. Actually, I will send out the carrot fritter recipe with one of the wines for the next box, because I think it'll work quite well with a couple of the wines that are coming up in box 3. So I'll send you the recipe then, and you can have go. You need a deep fryer. I guess you could probably shallow fry them in quite a bit of oil in a deep frying pan. Jill says, yep, that would work. So this wine is 14% alcohol, which for a Grenache of this level of concentration is actually pretty restrained. That said, the wine is not particularly restrained. It's not, it's got sort of dollops of juicy dark fruit to it. It's a little bit of lolly shop going on there as well, I think. It reminds me a bit of raspberry bullets, raspberry jelly covered with dark chocolate. Oh, Peter, don't mean it in a bad way, but Peter's sitting right there sending messages. Good on you, Pete. Very technically advanced. And he's got a dog under one arm and a glass of wine in his other hand, so he must have grown a third arm to be able to be texting me as well. Don't mean it in a bad way, but I reckon it smells a bit like lip gloss. I think that's right. There is a glossiness to this wine that is a little bit like that sort of, most lip glosses, I don't know what kind of lip gloss you like to wear, Pete, but but a lot of lip glosses have a fruity kind of a perfume to them, but they also have a slightly confectionery, slightly perfumey berry gloss. Yeah, Fiona, I reckon it reminds me a little bit of a berry, like a Body Shop berry or cherry lip gloss. That takes me back to the 80s again. But yeah, it's not quite fresh fruit. It's not quite lollies, but it is a bit lolly-ish, and it's a bit perfumey. Dewberry. I used to wear Dewberry perfume when I was about 19, Fiona, so thank you for that little memory. Don't tell the government that's a banned wine smell when it comes to teenage drinking. Oh, thanks, Shell. It's all right, because there's lots of everyone did, I agree. It's got lots of savouriness to it as well, so it does have that little kind of top note of sort of lolly, perfumey, dewberry, lip glossy kind of slickness but then there's the cut grass herbal notes, and then there's a little meatiness in there as well. And I think particularly when you're having it with your hamburger or your homemade sausage rolls or your bought sausage rolls or your sausage or your little party pies or whatever it is you're eating. Craig, you haven't told me what you're eating. Usually one of the ladies in your household tells me what they're eating. What has Joan created for you guys tonight? When Karen's not well, then I don't get any of the light and shade and colour of the tasting. The Angara's 14.5, which surprised me, says Cotty. It has weight, but it's not heavy. That's the thing that I love about Grenache. David's busy cooking burgers and fat chips as well. Awesome. Good on you, Fiona. That's good work. This wine also works with a burger or with your meat pies or whatever. That you can put a little bit of tomato sauce on the top, and that sweet tomatoey spiciness is going to work really, really well with Grenache. So Kay is having a Grenache Syrah blend from Old Vines in the Coteau de Languedoc, 14.5 as well. It's a lovely wine, was a present, so good excuse to open it. Absolutely. Well, and I think that those Shiraz Grenache, Grenache Shiraz Syrah blends are really cool because the Grenache brings that juicy berry fruit and a softness, while the Shiraz brings more spice and a bit more plumminess and a little bit more structure to the wine. So they work well together in the same way that Cabernet and Merlot work well in Bordeaux blends. Grenache and Syrah or Shiraz are very, very good bedfellows. They do talk about straight Grenache having a white pepper spice to it sometimes. And I think that for me, this French wine has got a white pepper character to it. But the Old McDonald from SC Pennell is, I think, a little bit too ripe, a little bit, well, not too ripe, but riper than the Gramenon, and it's got past the white pepper stage in its ripeness, and is really kind of juicy and glossy and slinky. The other thing that I think is cool about Grenache that I haven't talked about is the shape of the tannins. I kind of mentioned it right at the beginning. Grenache tannins, particularly these sort of high quality old vine Grenaches, yeah, Kate, yours would have that black pepper from the Shiraz, absolutely. And the white pepper in the Grenache will have just kind of been superseded by the black pepper in Shiraz because it's a bit, or the Syrah, because it's a bit more powerful as a grape variety and as a spice. Joan, hi, you've kept away from the sick household drinking Clarendon 2012. How fantastic. High tannins cherry berry with cheese and biscuits. Well, I'm very glad that Craig made sure that you had something lovely to drink, Joan, and I'm very glad that you were able to join us. So cheers to that. And I think cheese and biscuits is a perfect match to these juicy South Australian wines as well. So talking about the tannins, the tannin can be quite intense in a Grenache, but it's a very different shape from the sort of blocky tannins that you get in Shiraz or Syrah. The tannins are a bit finer, but they're not silky like Pinot Noir tannins. They're kind of grainy. And I find if I'm not sure whether the wine is a Grenache or maybe something else, if I can get that wine in my mouth and kind of just grind my back teeth together a little bit while the wine's in my mouth, you get this kind of gritty kind of texture from the tannins that tells you that it's Grenache. So I think that's a pretty cool thing about Grenache. Let's have a go with this one. There's so much sweet, juicy fruit in that wine. It's hard to kind of see past that to the tannins, but once the wine's gone out of your mouth, there is that kind of grainy texture of the tannins on the sides of my teeth and in the corners of my mouth, which I think is very Grenache-like and really cool. So there's a few of you who are drinking blends, and I think that those blends are really fun. Burger time, hooray! Joan, don't put the cork in. Finish the bottle. It'll help you to sleep tonight. The problem is it helps you go to sleep. But I'm finding these days that if I have a little bit too much of a big wine like this, and those Clarendon wines are quite high in alcohol too, Joan. I don't know if you can see on the back label where the alcohol is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was up around 15% or maybe a little bit more. But delicious all the same, and they get a bit chocolatey when they get that high level of ripeness in that confectionery sort of way. So we're talking about also and I thought it was really interesting that Shell was saying that the straight Grenache, the Basso Grenache from SC Pennell, works better with the all out with the brioche buns. Fantastic, Fiona, you're very spoiled. Ove chocolate. Joan, I don't think I know that kind of chocolate. unless anyway, I'll keep going. Love chocolate. Me too. Yes, I thought you might have missed yes, excellent. Love chocolate. I love chocolatiness in wines like this too because it's not too sweet. 14.5%. Okay, there you go. I think we're seeing a lot. I think Barossa producers particularly, and McLaren Vale too, are really paranoid about going over 14.5% now. But just remember that there's a little bit of leeway with labelling. If they're exporting the wine, it can be 5% above or below the number that 0.5%. That would be crazy if it was like 0.5% above or below the number that they put on there. So that wine at 14.5% could be 15%. The Ministry of Clouds 14.7 is probably correct because they probably, when they kind of go the 14.7, then it's, rather than rounding it up or down to a 0.5, usually it's more, it's actually the number that they got from their analysis. But if they're only selling the wine in Australia, then you've got still leeway of 1.5%. So if you're making a grenache in Barossa and you're not exporting it, then you can have a 16% wine that you label 14.5. So that's right. Yeah, that's 1.5% leeway. So just be a little bit careful if you're relying on the alcohol level on the back of the label. I know that Clarendon wine is exported, Joan, so you're probably okay, and you're probably not planning to go for a drive afterwards anyway, I hope. But yeah, these wines are not shrinking violets as far as alcohol is concerned, and they need to have these high alcohols to have the level of ripeness and concentration that they have. So it's not like people are going, oh, let's just make the wines really alcoholic. They're getting the fruit to the appropriate level of ripeness so that you get the flavour and the balance and the textures that we want to see. And then having to deal with those higher alcohols is just part of the deal. So Zach and Jack are having the Gigal. Is that the Côte d'Aron? 15%. That's pretty high. Peter actually said he had a bottle of the Gigal Côte d'Aron last night and it gave him a little bit of a headache this morning. So maybe that was because it was 15% alcohol. They're starting to make 16 plus Zins out. Oh, really, Craig? 16 plus Zinfandels out in around the Hunter. That's a bit scary. We did discuss reducing alcohol a while back. What can be done? Well, there's machines that you can put the wine through to take the alcohol out. You usually end up with pretty unbalanced wine as a result. Côte d'Aron, Zach and Jack, 15%. That's high, but they've had some really hot seasons in the Southern Rhone in recent years, and we're seeing Chardonnay de Paps that are like 15 and 16%. It's crazy. So this is an issue that France is having to deal with because of climate change. What was I saying? Reducing alcohol, okay. One of the easiest ways to have less alcohol in your wine is when the fruit comes in, add some water. The water, Shell, I'll get back there. I'm looping. It's a big loop today. I'll get back there. But in California, in America, adding water has been legal for a long time. In Australia, adding water is now legal and has been for a little while, a few years now. And it is a way to just reduce, because often when you have very high sugar levels, that leads to very high potential alcohol. If you've got a wine, if you've got fruit that you've picked at the end of, say, a 1 week or 2 week heat wave, then the fruit doesn't so much ripen as it shrivels, and so it loses water in the grapes and concentrates the sugars. So if you're adding water back to that kind of fruit, then you're really just kind of adding back the water that naturally should have been in the fruit. If you get the fruit too ripe and then add water back, then it's going to look kind of out of balance, like over diluted cordial. But in Europe, you're not allowed to add water to the must legally. I'm sure that it happens, but not as much as it does in the New World. So I'm coming back now. Here I come. Emily's saying that the Two Hands is 14% chocolate and raspberry flavours, probably a little bit too sweet for her, a little bit more savoury. That Kev likes it. Kev likes everything. Good on you, Kevin. So the Devilben Creek wines will have Devilben Creek in the wine. Well, Devilben Creek is actually a creek that's usually dry, Craig. So no, not necessarily. I mean, we're in a cool climate, so we don't have to worry about that as much as they do in warmer climates. So it's but it is something that is very kind of very not talked about much, but pretty much happens now in Australia when you have a hot year and things get dehydrated. A little bit of water at fruit reception time helps a lot. Anyway. I'm coming back now, Shell, to your Basso comment, because I think that the Basso being 100% Grenache, you said it works really well with all of the flavours in your burgers. And then, thank you, Kay. Your Shiraz Grenache Touriga is going to be a wine that is harder to match to certain food because it's got those 3 different grape varieties in there, and the Touriga gives you a lot of tannin, but also a lot of really dark fruit characters. The Shiraz will give you the spice and the mid-palate weight, and the Grenache will give you the perfume. So putting together a Shiraz Grenache Touriga, Shiraz Grenache Mourvedre, or whatever it is, it's about balancing it out. And those wines are delicious to just kind of drink with meaty food, fairly simple flavours, but because they've got lots of layers of flavour from the different grape varieties, they're less easy to match. And while Grenache works really well with tomato, and I think, Shell, you were saying that the tomato, particularly the tomato flavours, went that sort of burnt kind of dehydrated tomato character worked really well with the Grenache, but not so well with your blended wine. It's because Grenache likes tomatoey flavours. It's got the tannin and acid. So the acid in Grenache is naturally medium, and it just works with the umami and the sweet, savoury flavours of tomato, whereas Shiraz, not so much. Shiraz doesn't like tomato at all. So blending across the different varieties gives you a more complex wine, often a more balanced wine, particularly if the fruit's not like really the best, most expensive fruit that you can get. Then sometimes there'll be a little bit of a hole in the Grenache in one part of the palate and a little bit of hole in the Shiraz in one part of the nose, and the Touriga comes in and gives you a little bit more tannin than you would have got from the other two. So you put them together, and then the sum is what's the saying? The sum is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's often the case with blended wines, whereas straight Grenache has to be, I think, from old vines, has to be from really special vineyards. And then you get that intensity and complexity, but you get that purity that you get from the single variety. And circling back again to this Old MacDonald Grenache, if you ever get a chance to go to McLaren Vale and visit the guys at SC Pinel, visit the guys at Yangara. Not many people get to go and walk in the vineyards with them, but if you ever get a chance to do that, then take it up, because the vineyards are amazing. They're up on top of a ridge. It's quite sandy soil, and you get these kind of bits of sand through parts of the vineyards, and you can see the vines. They're all old vine, they're all bush vine grown, so they're kind of little bush vines. They look all craggy and ugly, and like they're kind of scrappy hanging on. And depending on what kind of soil is in what part of the vineyard, you get quite different vigor and quite different intensity of growth. So you'll get a wiggly line of vines that look really small and kind of struggling, and they'll be in the sandiest soil. And then you'll get the vines next to them. It's not a straight line. It's kind of another wiggly line through the vineyard that's incredibly much bigger vines, much greener in colour, healthier looking vines, but they don't produce quite as exciting fruit. So, and they ripen at different times as well. So you talk to people like Pete Fraser at Yangara, you talk to Steve Pennell at SC Pennell, and they pick these old vineyards in a really kind of random way from the outsider looking in. But they're like, we know these vineyards like the back of our hands. They're not their own vineyards, but they've been sort of buying fruit from the owners of the vineyards. So McDonald family's vineyard. They also make a smart vineyard grenache, which is delicious, much more red fruited, much more elegant. And they pick these vineyards sort of, it's not block by block, it's kind of wiggly bit over here and blobby bit over here. They know which vines are going to be ready when, and it's quite bizarre. It's quite labour intensive, but it's also really fascinating to watch. So I think Grenache has been a great variety in Australia that's been very underappreciated for a long time. We have some really passionate young winemakers, and I think Steve's probably about my age or a little bit older, so not so young anymore. Pete Fraser's a little bit younger than me, but he's an amazing winemaker at Yangara. There's a lot of other producers. The guys at Ministry of Clouds are I think they're in their 40s, so they've got plenty of room to grow and keep getting better and keep doing amazing stuff. A lot of these guys are making really incredible wines, and they love Grenache because they love drinking it. Like everyone grows Shiraz. Everyone grows Shiraz in Australia. We grow Shiraz here, and Craig's just asked if we'd buy some Grenache in to make a Grenache Shiraz. No, we wouldn't, Craig. We've talked about maybe trialling some Grenache in the trial vineyard, and I'm not sure what decision we've made about that, but we do love Grenache here. I think it's probably a bit cool here, even at the Moorooduc site, which is one of the warmer sites on the peninsula, to grow Grenache. And our philosophy at Moorooduc is to only make Mornington Peninsula wine from Mornington Peninsula fruit, and fruit that we have control over the growing. So if we were to make the sort of Grenache that we like to drink at the moment, we would have to go away from the Mornington Peninsula. That said, I was talking to Michael Dillon from Bindi yesterday, and he's got a Grenache that I'm going to try and buy some of from him. That's under his Dillon label. He makes a few different things. It's a Heathcote Grenache, and it sounds really interesting. So I'm going to buy some of that and have a bit of a drink of that. Heathcote's a lot warmer than the Mornington Peninsula, and is somewhere where Shiraz does well. But I think I'd be very interested to see what the Grenache looks like. There's a lot of talk in the wine industry about cool climate Grenache, but I think probably Moorooduc is a little bit too cool climate for Grenache, but never say never. So what's happening next? It's all a bit complicated. So we're having a break for 2 weeks. Jill and I are going on holiday. Next Thursday, we're going to be on an aeroplane. And the following Thursday, we're going to be on an aeroplane going to Bali and coming back from Bali. So 2 weeks break. I'm sorry that we couldn't make it just 1 week, but please feel free to have a drink and think of me on Thursday anyway. Oh no, Cody, I'm telling you important stuff. Kay, you're coming in on Sunday, are you? Cool. I'm back. Excellent. Phew. So next week and the following week, we're having a break, 2 weeks break. We have the new box ready to go. Box 3 is ready to go. It's 2015 wines. There are 5 wines in the box. Just they're mostly single vineyard wines. So just to sort of make it. Oh, you're on Heathcote. You are 2K. You're going to Heathcote, and that's why Jeff couldn't come to the couldn't come to our Pinot lunch on Sunday. It's your fault and the Rolls Royce Club. All good. That'll be fun. There's popcorn in the box. Yes, Jack and Jack. There's a popcorn in the box which we're going to have with the first wine, which is the 2015 Estate Chardonnay, which we're having on. I think it's the 8th of June. It's that first. It's that Thursday. That's it is the 8th of June. In 3 weeks' time. So get your boxes ordered. Peter's going to deliver to local folk, and the rest of you will get it in the mail as quickly as you send your orders in. A bunch of Drinks with Kate doing the July session, Shell. Yes, that would be the mushroom tour in July, which is going to be awesome. King's birthday weekend. If you are thinking about booking for that, but you haven't yet, we still got some spots, and I'm going to throw it open to the whole mailing list on Monday. So please, if you do want to come to the mushroom tour with Cameron and then the mushroom lunch on King's birthday weekend Sunday, give us a call tomorrow or over the weekend, and we'll get you in the book so that you don't miss out. Magic Stalks in July. Yes, Shell, the Magic Stalks lunch is proving to be very popular with many of you Drinks with Kate folk, because you're the ones who know all about Magic Stalks, so you're in the know. It's going to be very, very cool. So the Magic Stalks lunch is going to be very fun too. So we've got a couple of events coming up here, and what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So when you get your box, keep your popcorn. I will send you some instructions or some suggestions about what you might like to dress your popcorn with. Fiona, you're saying you've never done popcorn and Chardonnay. Well, hopefully this will be a very pleasurable experience for you. We did it, was it last year or the year before? Anyway, we did it once before. It was very fun. If you do want more than just one popcorn, just pop a note in the comments section of your order form online, and we'll give you a call to pop that through separately. Butter and salt's good, Fiona, but there's so much more that you can do. I'll send you some ideas, but butter and salt's it can be pretty classical, so pretty delicious. We are also going to do Drinks with Kate Live in September or October, and I'm just working on the date for that, so I'll send that out next week. Anne-Marie, I probably wouldn't go for butterscotch on the popcorn, but it's totally up to you. I remember our Chardonnays, even with some age, don't get too buttery. So you want that combination of, a bit too sweet. You want that, I think, butter, sort of almost brown butter, so it's sort of caramelized, but then you want some saltiness and maybe either cheese or some herbs through it or something like that. But I will send you some more suggestions. Emily, Drinks with Kate Live will be a tasting here on a Sunday afternoon. It's exactly what it sounds like. Come and have a drink with me in real life. I thought it would be fun. It's something that I've wanted to do for ages. But we'll do at least one later in the year. I will send you some more dates next week before I go on holiday. In the meantime, keep drinking beautiful wines. You do need to make it for that, Craig, and I promise I will get you some dates very, very soon. I've been promising you for months. I'm sorry about that, but we'll get there. And Joan, I'd love you to come too if you can. That would be amazing. Guys, I'm going to go now and drink the last of my grenache. Thank you very much. It's been awesome. I will miss you for the next 2 weeks, but I will enjoy my break. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Have a lovely couple of weeks off. Good, Craig. Joan, that's fantastic. Fantastic news. We'll make that happen. I'm adamant. Polly's getting restless. She says, you've been talking for 55 minutes now, Kate. You've got to shut up. I will love you and leave you. Take care, everyone. And don't forget to get your order in for your next Drinks with Kate box really soon. It's going to be awesome. Love you all. See you in 3 weeks' time. Bye.